The first time he called me ugly, it was quiet. No shouting. Just a soft laugh, like he was sharing a harmless truth. That laugh stayed with me longer than the word itself. If you've ever loved someone who slowly made you hate your reflection, you'll understand the story. And before we begin, if stories like this hit close to home, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and tell your story in the comments. You're not alone here. My name is Lena. I grew up in a small apartment with thin walls and constant noise, arguments, bills, neighbors yelling. My mother worked double shifts. My father left early. I learned early that love was something you earned by being useful, quiet, and grateful. By the time I met him, I was already tired, financially stressed, mentally drained, socially invisible. He was my escape, or so I thought. He told me I wasn't his usual type, but that he liked my personality. I laughed it off. I should have listened to the warning in my chest. I was 22, insecure, working a job that barely paid rent, surrounded by people who looked past me. When someone finally looked at me, even with judgment, I held on. I didn't know then that this was the beginning of losing myself, piece by piece, in silence. It started with jokes. "You'd be pretty if you tried harder. Why don't you dress like other girls?" He'd say while scrolling his phone, barely looking at me. I'd stand there, feeling stupid for caring. At night, lying beside him, I replayed his words until sleep finally took me out of exhaustion. My friends noticed before I did. "He talks down to you," one said quietly over coffee. I defended him instantly. I always did, because admitting the truth meant admitting I had chosen this. Social pressure made it worse. Couples around us looked perfect online. Smiling photos, filtered happiness. I felt defective for struggling. Money was tight. I paid half the rent, but still borrowed for groceries. He criticized how I ate, how I walked, how I laughed too loud. One night, after I cried in the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. Harsh light, dark circles. I whispered, maybe he's right. My family didn't know. My mother had her own problems. I didn't want to add mine. Loneliness wrapped around me like heavy air. Even when he held my hand in public, I felt invisible. His words echoed louder than his affection. I wasn't trying to be loved anymore. I was trying to survive being tolerated. The worst moments were small. At a party, he introduced me as my girlfriend. She's sensitive. Everyone laughed. I smiled, feeling heat rise to my face. Later, in the car, I asked why he said that. He sighed like I was exhausting. "Because it's true," he said. "Don't be dramatic." I stopped wearing makeup. Not because I didn't care, but because trying felt pointless. When I dressed up, he'd say I was overcompensating. When I didn't, I was letting myself go. There was no winning. Just constant adjustment, shrinking myself to fit his mood. At night, the city noise seeped through the window, cars, sirens, laughter from somewhere else. I lay awake, stomach empty, mind racing. I worried about rent, about aging, about being unlovable. My inner voice sounded like him now. Critical. Cold. I avoided mirrors. I avoided conversations. At work, I messed up simple tasks because my mind was always elsewhere. My boss warned me once. I nodded, embarrassed, thinking how everything in my life felt like a warning I kept ignoring. He never hit me. That made it easier to stay. But words can bruise too. They settle deep, convincing you that leaving would be foolish, because who else would want you? When he cheated, I found out by accident. A message flashed on his phone. A name I didn't recognize. A heart emoji. My hands shook as I handed it back to him. He didn't even apologize. He shrugged. "She's hotter than you," he said casually. "What did you expect?" Something inside me cracked, but not loudly. Quietly, like ice under pressure. I cried alone that night, sitting on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, knees pulled in. The fridge hummed. My phone stayed silent. I thought about leaving, but fear followed immediately. Where would I go? How would I pay rent? What if he was right, and this was the best I'd ever get? Shame glued me in place. I stopped telling people how I felt. I didn't want pity. I didn't want advice. I wanted relief, but I didn't know how to reach it. My world shrank to work, home, and his approval. Every insult felt deserved now. He started comparing me openly to other women. Online. On the street. Each comparison chipped away whatever self-respect I had left. I wasn't angry anymore. Just numb. Existing took effort. Dreaming felt impossible. I was surviving, not living, and even that felt temporary. One evening, after another argument about my appearance, I walked outside alone. Cold air. Streetlights buzzing. I sat on a bus bench and watched people pass by. Strangers with full lives I knew nothing about. I wondered if they felt as empty as I did. I thought about my younger self, the girl who used to write in notebooks, who believed kindness mattered. She felt distant, almost fictional. I hadn't failed once. I'd failed repeatedly, silently, by staying. At work, I overheard coworkers joking about confidence. One said, "Ugly people just need money." Everyone laughed. I forced a smile, heart sinking. Social judgment felt everywhere. In comments, in ads, in his voice. Beauty felt like currency I didn't have. I stopped eating properly. Anxiety twisted my stomach. At night, I scrolled through old photos, trying to find the moment I became this version of myself. I couldn't pinpoint it. It happened slowly, like erosion. He told me once, "You should be grateful I'm with you." I nodded automatically. Later, alone, I whispered, "I am," and hated myself for saying it. The breakup didn't come with drama. He just said he was bored, packed a bag, left. The door closed, and the apartment felt too big, too quiet. I sat on the floor for a long time, listening to my own breathing. Relief didn't come immediately. Panic did. Bills, rent, loneliness. I cried harder than I had during the relationship, because now there was no one to blame. Just me and the mess. I slept with the lights on. Silence felt loud. My phone stayed empty. Friends checked in, but I didn't know what to say. I felt ugly in a deeper way now, discarded. I blamed myself. For staying. For believing him. For losing years. My inner dialogue was cruel. "You deserve this. You're forgettable." The world didn't stop just because mine did. I worked extra shifts. Came home exhausted. Ate cheap food. Avoided mirrors again. Survival mode returned, but different. He was gone, yet his voice remained. That felt like the cruelest part. Karma hadn't arrived yet. Only consequences. One night, after a 14-hour day, I sat on my bed fully dressed. Shoes still on. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I felt empty, scraped out. Emotional exhaustion settled in my bones. I realized I was tired of hating myself, but I didn't know how to stop. That scared me. The idea that this could be permanent. That this numbness was my future. I thought about texting him, asking for reassurance. The urge scared me too. I saw how dependent I had become on someone who broke me. That awareness hurt more than the insults ever did. There was no motivation speech in my head. No sudden confidence. Just a quiet thought. I can't keep living like this. It didn't come with answers. Only discomfort. Fear. Hesitation. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. The room smelled like stale air and laundry detergent. I didn't feel strong. I felt cornered. And sometimes, that's where change begins. Not with hope, but with nowhere left to go. The decision wasn't dramatic. I didn't announce anything. I just stopped running. I wrote down my fears on a piece of paper. Being alone. Being judged. Failing again. Seeing them in ink made them real and manageable. I decided to try, not to succeed. That distinction mattered. I updated my resume. Looked for better work. Started walking in the mornings because staying still felt worse. Every step felt uncertain. I prepared mentally for disappointment. Told myself it might not work. That I might still feel ugly. That effort doesn't guarantee reward. But doing nothing guaranteed staying here. I faced mirrors again. Briefly. Awkwardly. I didn't compliment myself. I just didn't insult myself. That was enough for now. There was suspense in every application sent. Every ignored email. I reminded myself that this was survival, not transformation. Fear sat beside me constantly. But for the first time, it wasn't driving. I was. Progress was slow. Painfully slow. I got rejected. A lot. Some days I wanted to quit. I worked. Saved small amounts, skipped comforts. Discipline replaced desperation, but barely. I found a second job. Tired became normal. But something shifted. Each small win, a paid bill, a positive email, added weight to a new story about myself. One not centered on his opinion. I still had bad days. Days I felt ugly again. Days I remembered his words. But they didn't stop me anymore. They just hurt. I met other women through work. Heard similar stories. Different faces, same wounds. That's when I understood the karma part. Not revenge, but release. He faded. His life continued somewhere else. But he no longer defined mine. Momentum built quietly. No applause. Just consistency. I wasn't healed. I was moving forward anyway. A year later, my life looked different, but not perfect. I lived in a smaller place, but it was mine. I worked hard, rested when I could, laughed more. I didn't become beautiful overnight. I became real to myself again. I ran into him once. He looked the same, said the same things. And for the first time, none of it stuck. That was the karma. Not watching him fail, but realizing I didn't need his approval to exist. I learned that being called ugly says more about the speaker than the listener. That staying can hurt more than leaving. That survival is sometimes the bravest thing you do. If you're listening to this and hearing your own story, know this: you don't need to prove anything. You just need to stop believing the lie. If this story meant something to you, subscribe for more real stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear they're not alone.